Robby Starbuck joins us now. He's a conservative activist, and many of you are familiar with his work. Robby, thanks for being here. Tell us your story, man, because you wanted to come on, and I think people need to know about what's been going on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, it's been wild what has happened. So essentially 2 years ago, I found out that Google's AI, which then was called Bard, was saying all kinds of crazy stuff about me that just wasn't true, from saying that I was a supporter of the KKK to even making arguments for the death penalty because I guess some of my takes offend people on the left. But then it got much worse when they introduced Gemini and Gemma. Gemini and Gemma went so far as to make accusations that I was accused of sexual assault, of raping people, including people who are PG as possible for the audience, in case there's kids in the car. But, you know, it can't be stressed enough how hard we tried to get Google to stop this. I notified them starting 2 years ago that this was going on, and my lawyers at Dillon Law Firm have been repeatedly letting them know and sending cease and desist letters throughout this year. And Google just continued to allow this stuff to go on. The lies got so intense, so elaborate that you almost can't believe it. And it came from prompts as simple as, tell me about Robby Starbuck, or somebody looking me up, right? So this wasn't somebody saying, hey, invent a story. It was as simple as, tell me about this guy, right? And it got so detailed that it invented fake court records, fake police records, fake victims, fake therapy records, and it would get so detailed that if you said, hey, what are your sources for this? It would invent fake court records and also fake media articles. Okay, so it would say foxnews.com/Robby Starbuck sexual assault allegations, or something along those lines. And it did that with all of the major media outlets, essentially, and some of the biggest figures in media. It even invented fake statements from J.D. Vance and President Trump about the situation. So this is obviously incredibly dangerous, and you have to wonder why this is happening, right? Because something is feeding this information to the AI, and that we intend to find out in discovery. But if you think about like the long side of this, right? Like look 10 years down the line. Control of our country is decided by a very small number of swing seats, and it's very easy to envision a future where this type of, malicious AI is deployed against every right-wing candidate in those swing seats, and you're able to shift 5 to 6% of the vote based on telling lies about the candidates to voters who reach out saying, hey, tell me there's a difference between these two candidates.
This is a hugely important story, and I appreciate you coming on. We're talking to Robby Starbuck. You just heard him lay out what happened with Google AI. There's a lawsuit pending, but if they could do this to you, and this is where I think this becomes so important, and you just hit on it, I mean, they could do it to, yes, Republican Senate candidates, Republican presidential candidates, Republican congressional candidates. But I think a lot of people out there also know that arguably at least those guys can punch back.
Yeah.
Why couldn't they do this to anyone in America where Google, what happens when your name is Googled is probably the number one most important thing on the internet, I would say, for most people in most professions. This seems hugely important, not just for what happened to you, but for the message that it's sending. It could happen to anyone. What are you trying to do to remedy it?
Clay, I was hoping you would bring that up because you're exactly right. The biggest problem is not that even this is happening to me. Obviously, I'm concerned to damage my reputation and all those things, but I'm thinking about my kids. Like, this can happen to your son, your daughter, your wife, your husband, and it could eliminate your ability to get jobs. I mean, I want people to think about this, how far AI is reaching into our lives. It's already being used in reputation scoring for insurance, which, by the way, crazy story, I was actually denied insurance by, I think it was 5 insurers this last year. I've never been denied in my life. I'm an auto pay person, never been in a car accident. Like, there is no reason I should be denied for insurance. It took until the 6th insurer for us to even get an offer from a major insurance company. Every other one said risky, wouldn't tell us why. And we're going to have to figure out through discovery if it was because it was pulling that information from AI. But you can get debanked. You can, have what job interviewers often do. They Google the people who are applying for jobs, right? And so you get Googled on Gemini, and they tell this potential job that you're actually accused of some heinous crime, and this could be as simple as getting back at you for your politics that Google doesn't share, right? So it's very easy to see where this can get very dangerous very fast. And so I think, part of the remedy here isn't just making me whole and fixing the situation. It's fixing the problem for good and setting a standard and setting precedent that AI cannot harm humans. That needs to be the first principle of AI, because if you allow it on this level where it's defamatory, right? you're baking that in at the root level of a tree that is either going to bear fruit that helps humanity grow into abundance, or you're going to grow poison fruit and it's going to be to the detriment of humanity. What you bake in that root is very important. So we're teaching AI now what is going to later be very important in its deployment across all platforms in law enforcement, medicine, everything else. And so that's why I feel like this is a critically important fight. I'm thinking 10 years out, 15 years out, how deeply this is going to affect all of us and our kids.
What was it like when you were trying to get answers in the early stage and then throughout from a company like Google that is so vastly powerful, influential, connected, and resourced? Yet I can only imagine, Robby, like if this happened to me, I wouldn't even know who do you call
Yeah.
or email. Who can you get to actually sit down or speak to you as a human to try to address this? Feels like you were probably in a very Kafka-esque, like, where do I go for justice situation.
Yeah, it was very confusing, honestly. Even with me, where I'm able to get in front of the media, I'm able to, pay lawyers to be able to do this stuff. But back then, initially, I raised the red flag about this publicly, just adding and direct messaging people at Google, like, hey, can you get this fixed? And eventually, a Google employee reached out to me. And this lady seemed like she wanted to help. So I laid out the whole story and sent screenshots from the people who had sent them to me, and that we were able to recreate these. She says, okay, I want to help. And I checked in over time, and it was about 3 months later. She lets me know, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to fix this. And this is in the lawsuit. We put all the receipts, okay? She says, I'm so sorry I wasn't able to help. I am resigning today. And she resigned. And then things got much worse with Gemma and Gemini. And here's the other thing that's really scary, right? Is that you'd think a company like this could fix all this, right? Well, it took until last week to finally get them to fix some of this stuff in the actual app and the google.com website. But here's what's crazy. There are over 150 million wild downloads of Gemma. Gemma is also used by developers beyond just being a chatbot to help develop apps that power the future, right? And then Gemini, same thing. Gemini has a bunch uncountable digital downloads that we don't even know what that number is. And many of these, they can never be connected to the internet or won't be connected to the internet and cannot be fixed remotely by Google. So these things, which will be used in many different contexts over God knows how long, can never be changed. And that's pretty wild. And I think that's something that also has to change in this process.
You're in the process of going through discovery and finding all this stuff out. Buck, you mentioned, how do you even get a person to be able to address? We found out when we sold Outkick to Fox. Fox went through the deep dive and they said, hey, you're not indexed on Google. And I knew that was true because we would break news on Outkick and then we would never show up at the top of Google search results. And we had gone through this 4 or 5 different times with them and they had said everything's fine. Somebody had just taken us out of the Google search results. Robby, that had to be an individual, right? Somebody just decided they don't like me. They're one of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of Google employees. They hide your site over in the refuse so that you can't be found. Do you feel like, and again, I know the discovery is underway, do you feel like ultimately this is malice driven by an individual or individuals inside of the company to have set up? Or, and I know I'm asking you to speculate a little bit, do you think this is just AI run amok and for some reason you happen to get dragged through the cycle like this?
So there's 2 different things here. One is, does it meet the legal standard of malice no matter what? Absolutely. It doesn't matter what the intent was. The fact was they were notified so many times over the course of 2 years to fix this, and they didn't fix it. And they continually, repeatedly told the same lies, inventing the same situations with similar victims and evidence and all these fake news articles and everything. That's gross negligence that equals malice, right? But then there's my personal view, right? My personal view is one where I can't get myself to a place where I think this is just AI run amok, right? Because Google's response publicly has been to essentially excuse this as hallucinations, is what they say. Well, you deep dive into hallucinations, and I've talked to AI experts. They're typically kind of disjointed and kind of like weird, right? They're pulling things from different places and kind of mixing them all together. There's too many similar threads and too many commonalities in what it continually repeated about me for it to fit a hallucination pattern, by my estimation from talking to these experts, and I think lawyers agree with this. And so when you look at it from that context, it's very hard for me to get anywhere except for thinking this was deliberately poisoned. So that's how I view it, right? Is it seems deliberate. When you get as detailed as these things did and you repeatedly refuse to own up to the fact that it's a lie, and this is what's crazy, like you can literally answer back to this AI, and we had people saying things like, hey, these news stories are totally false, nothing like this ever happened, and it would double and triple down that it did happen. And it went so far on one occasion to actually create a fake article in a real journalist's name when somebody pressed the AI and saying the link didn't work to the story it was sending them. So it literally invented a fake news story. I want people to think about this, right? We're at this precipice where we have all these image generators and voice generators and video generators, but they're not all quite interconnected to the chatbots as well as they will be a year or two from now, maybe even less. Had this continued to happen for another year or two, it would have literally been inventing fake videos and audio of me doing these crimes. I want people to think about that because if you've seen the AI outputs that we're seeing in video and audio, there's currently a top charting music artist. I think it's called Breaking Rust. That is AI, right? Like, and you can't distinguish it from a human being. It sounds like a real human musician. That is so incredibly dangerous. And again, I imagine our sons and our daughters facing accusations with fake AI videos and audio. And it's very clear when you think about that we need guardrails.
No doubt. Robby, this is fantastic. If people want to know more about this story, where would you tell them to go?
Follow me on social media, YouTube, X, at Robby Starbuck, R-O-B-B-Y Starbuck, or go to robbystarbuck.com if you want to read the actual lawsuit. We've put it up there in case anybody wants to read the full thing. Even lawyers who don't like me, people who hate me, have said, like, dang, they have absolutely an incredible case. So I think it's a seminal case in the fight for fairness and getting rid of bias in AI.
Appreciate the time. It is an important story. Keep us updated. We want to continue to share this story as we move along.
Thank you, gentlemen, for shining a light on it.
That's Robby Starbuck. All right, Buck, I'm going to try to make sure that we win. We've had a couple of different losing weeks here in a row on Prize Picks. So tomorrow, Thursday Night Football returns. This is simple. There's only 3 people involved. Drake May, more than 1.5 touchdown passes. Bo Nix, more than 1.5 touchdown pass. And Sam Darnold, more than 1.5 touchdown passes. If all 3 of those hit, 3-1. $5 turns into $15. 20 turns into 60. 100 turns into 300. You can play along with us at prizepicks.com, code CLAY. You can play in California, Texas, Georgia if you're feeling left out. That is prizepicks.com, code CLAY. Drake May, more than 1.5 touchdown passes. Sam Darnold, more than 1.5. And then Bo Nix, more than 1/2. If all 3 of those quarterbacks hit, 3-1. That's prizepicks.com, code CLAY for $50 in your account when you play $5. Prizepicks.com, code CLAY.